Hi, I'm Mike Robichaud, head of guitar repairs for Long & McQuade, and I'm going to show you how to change a string on a banjo. So if you've never changed strings on a banjo before, I highly recommend that you just change them one at a time. The bridge is free floating here, so if you take all 5 strings off, it's going to fall off. It's just the string tension that's holding it in place. So if you just change strings one at a time, the bridge won't move, and after you've changed all the strings, everything will still work properly. So if you've never changed your strings before, I strongly recommend you just do it one at a time. So step 1 is to remove the old string. So start by taking all the tension off of it. You can just disconnect it at the headstock and at the tailpiece. All right, so with our old string removed, we've got our new string ready to go. Pretty much all banjos use loop end strings like this, and every tailpiece is a bit different, but they're all some variation of this. There's going to be a series of hooks in the back for each of the strings, and then up at the leading edge of the tailpiece, there's notches or holes that the strings pass through to give them the appropriate downward pressure before they head to the bridge. So you want to make sure that you don't miss those. So the loop end goes onto the hook, and it doesn't just go straight to the bridge. It needs more downward pressure, so it goes into its notch, and that gives you the appropriate break angle. Every tailpiece is a bit different, but they're all some variation on this. So with the strings secure in the tailpiece and in the appropriate string slot in the bridge, bring it up to the headstock. There's a number of different ways to attach strings at the headstock. They all have their advantages. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to show you the absolute easiest way. So line up the peg so that the string can pass straight through. And now holding some tension on it back here above the headstock, now what we need to do is measure out the appropriate amount of slack. We're just going to wind this string up so that it goes around the post about 4 or 5 times. For the wound string, it can go around 2.5, 3 times, but for the plain strings, we want them to go around 4 or 5 times. That'll give them enough friction that they'll stay tight on the post. But in order to get the appropriate amount of windings, we've got to measure the appropriate amount of slack. So for the treble strings, where you want 4 to 5 windings, you're going to want to measure back about 2 frets worth of slack. So the way we're going to do this, grab onto the string and hold onto it with your pinky and your ring finger, and use your index finger to keep some downward pressure on it. And this way you can measure back those 2 frets as you bring your hand up, and you keep back pressure at the tailpiece so it doesn't come unhooked. Now we've got the appropriate amount of slack measured out. And you can start winding. As you wind, the string's going to kink itself. And keep going. Now this is important. As we wind, we want to make sure that all of the windings we're putting on the post are going underneath this tail here. Everything should wind down. The windings should stack nice and neatly, one below the other. So keep going. So that's about 4.5 windings there. Everything's nice and neat. There's no loose loops. It's not overlapping. Bring it up the last little bit. So now the string's starting to tighten up. I want to make sure that it's seated properly in the notch at the tailpiece, that it's seated properly in the string slot at the bridge, and now up at the headstock I can place it carefully in nut slot appropriately at the headstock. You can give it a gentle little stretch away from the body. That'll help seat it. That'll help speed up the breaking in process. Bring it up close to pitch and clip off the tail. I want to leave a millimeter or 2 there. You can bend it up, get it out of the way so it doesn't stab you. And that's how you change a string. Now, we should also talk about the 5th string here. I'm going to show you this process for restringing the 5th string. It's basically the same, but there's a few finer points. So start taking all the tension off. Same process here at the tailpiece. And really the same process at the tuner, but we really want to make sure that there's enough windings on here. It's better to have a few extra than too few. So holding the string the same way, I'm going to measure back 2 frets, plus a tiny bit extra just to be sure. Start winding it up. Kinks itself. Make sure all the windings are passing underneath. As it starts to get tight, we'll check that it's properly seated at the tailpiece. Make sure that it's safely in its string slot at the bridge. And place it in the 5th string nut. So depending on the design of your banjo, you may have a little circular nut here with a slot in it. It's either bone or plastic. That's real simple. You just place it in the slot, the same as you do up at the headstock. This banjo, though, uses a railroad spike for the 5th string nut. So this actually the string actually slides underneath it like that, and that gives it downward pressure and pushes it against the 5th fret here, and it uses the 5th fret as the actual break point for the string. So you want to make sure that that's firmly underneath there before you bring the string up to full tension. If you try and slide it under full tension, it can damage the string. So now with that brought up to pitch, we can clip the string off. On the 5th string tuner here, I recommend you really cut it off absolutely as close and short as you can. That's part of the reason we put a few extra windings on this one, just so that we can clip the string off as short as possible and still have it be safe. Just because as you're playing, the position of the 5th string tuner, if you've got a long tail sticking off there, it can kind of stab you in the fingers. So you want that as short as possible so that that's not going to be a problem. All right, that's really all there is to it. So once again, I'm Mike Robichaux for Long & McQuade. That's how you restring a banjo. Thanks for watching.